Jammu and Kashmir, a historic day, a massive day, and one that has invoked a lot of emotions when it comes to this. Jammu and Kashmir being integrated with the rest of India, Section 370 being scrapped, 35A being scrapped as per the President's order. We're going to discuss this and a lot more with Legal Eagle Senior Counsel Harish Salve now joining us. Mr. Salve, good evening. Thank you for being a part of India tonight. Good to have you back in India. This is Nayantara, and I hope you got a hero's welcome after what we saw at the International Court of Justice and Kulbhushan Jadhav. But today we've got you on the channel to talk about the historic and a massive day with Section 370. I've been reading a lot about what you've had to say. You've called it a major surgery, but you've also said don't jump the gun and think that Section 370 has indeed been scrapped. Mr. Salve, can you explain to our viewers why that is the case? And today, for us Indian, how has life changed? If you could put it down for us simply.
So let's cut to the chase, Nayantara. There is a phrase which is being used that 370 has been abrogated. If it's an emotional phrase, if it is a rhetorical phrase, I have no comments to make. But as a matter of law, that's plainly wrong. Article 370 was brought in at a time where the Indian Constitution was not fully implemented in Kashmir, and that the structure therefore was based on the instrument of accession. Certain powers were given to Kashmir, but there was a power reserved to apply the Constitution over a period of time by presidential orders to Kashmir. As the long title to the section, as the heading to the section says, it was a temporary provision. That's how they started the process of applying the Constitution. In 1954, the fundamental rights and various other provisions of the Constitution were extended to Kashmir. When these were extended to Kashmir, an exception was made by inserting Article 35A. Now, this was not added to the Constitution. It was not a constitutional amendment. The extension of the fundamental rights was with the exception of Article 35A. This was also challenged in Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld it, but said that it was a political decision, although they realized that it was not free from its criticism. Today, the presidential order which introduced the fundamental rights with ifs and buts was taken away, and a presidential order was made which says the whole of the Indian Constitution applies to Jammu and Kashmir. To me, as a constitutional lawyer, I think it's a moment by which we are saying today now Kashmir is fully integrated with India because the whole of the Indian Constitution applies in Jammu and Kashmir. Then comes the question of reorganizing the territories of Jammu and Kashmir. It's legally a completely separate issue, politically obviously joined at the hip. Legally, reorganization of states has happened all the time. We created, I think in 99 or 2000, we created Chhattisgarh, we created Jharkhand. More recently, we carved out Telangana from Andhra. So, reorganization of states is a political process, but it has a constitutional format, and the constitutional format is the president has to send the recommendation of the states to the union, and then the union parliament passes the reorganization law. Here the assembly having been dissolved, parliament was in season of the powers of the state assembly. So, acting as the state assembly, it sends the recommendation, the reorganization bill, and parliament acting as parliament passes it. There is nothing illegal about this. You may say how wise it is constitutionally or how wise it is not constitutionally. I mean, personally speaking, I think to suggest, as somebody was suggesting, that this is a matter which should have been discussed with everybody, people should have been taking into confidence, I think we are fooling ourselves, because positions are so hard on this that nobody would have really been willing to see any other point of view. There was a sharp divide between those who feel Kashmir should be made an integral part of India and those who feel that no, its identity should be maintained. You heard some very strong words coming even at the suggestion of doing any such thing. So, I don't think this was a matter up for discussion between anybody. The government decided to do it, they have gone and done it. personally, I support this. I realize there is another contrary point of view, but I don't get into political debates and political questions.
Mr. Salve, hi, good evening. This is Ruchi Bhatia from the New Delhi newsroom. The opposition says just the manner in which Section 35A has been revoked sets a very bad precedent, indicating that the centre can reorganize any state by imposing president rule. I have two questions on this. Firstly, is the centre in its right to do what they've done today? And from a legal standpoint, what challenges will the reorganization bring with itself?
So, you first of all conflated two unrelated issues, politically related, legally unrelated. 35A and reorganization have nothing to do with each other. Even without reorganizing the state, they could have substituted the presidential order. So, let's get that first of all very clearly. Secondly comes the question of reorganization. Reorganization of territories is always a political decision. Whether or not it was recommended by the state assembly, if otherwise the facts justify reorganizing a state, if the politics is so sharply divided as the way it is, Parliament has done it. And India, that's why we always say, is not a federal polity. India is a quasi-federal polity, with the tilt in favor of the centre clearly visible in the constitution. Now, you may discuss the political wisdom of doing this, but whether the Parliament should have done this or not is another story, which you can have 2 points of view. Could they have done this? The answer clearly is yes.
Mr. Salve, this is Nayantara again. So while you said that we are fooling ourselves in believing that there could be a discussion, the other way to look at it is the Rajya Sabha passed all the 4 Jammu and Kashmir bills with a 2/3 majority. Even the opposition has not been able to fall in one camp. Now, a lot of the naysayers and critics are saying and calling this a dark day of democracy in the way it was carried out, with mainstream politicians being isolated. The very fact in the run-up to this, you had extra security being deployed, Section 144 being imposed, then mobile internet had been cancelled. You're the best who's out there, so I want to ask you, because I think it's only a matter of time before we see Ms. Mufti or Mr. Abdullah move court. Would they have a locus standi? Will they have a legal, a good locus standi in court to fight what has actually transpired today?
Yeah, well, your question is about locus standi. They will clearly have locus standi to challenge what the government has done. Whether the challenge will be successful, whether the challenge is meritorious, that's quite another matter. Anybody, any public-minded person can come who feels strongly that this is unconstitutional for any reason, has a locus to come and challenge it, and most certainly the leaders of the political parties in Jammu and Kashmir have the locus standi to challenge it, and that in fact is the way of resolving such controversies. If they feel so strongly that this is a fraud on the constitution, this is a constitutional aberration, I hope instead of taking to the streets, they take to coming to the Supreme Court and come and challenge it and have the matter resolved.
So you're saying the locus standi. What about the way it was carried out? Would your sense be that maybe we saw two unrelated developments last week? The extra security that had been deployed, the tourists being asked to leave Jammu and Kashmir, and today what has happened in Parliament. Are you seeing these perhaps as two separate events, or was it the build up to today's massive event to make Jammu and Kashmir safe for what has transpired today?
Let me tell you, Nayantara, the point is, do you trust the government or do you not trust the government? The government has been telling us, Imran Khan said, I believe I read somewhere, Imran Khan said there are 50,000 or 40,000 terrorists ready to cross over. The government has said that there is a very delicate situation on the border. I don't see any reason to doubt that. The government said, with these kind of a situation on the border, if such a major, maybe the government felt that the political need of the hour was that if this is where we are, might as well get whatever we have to done and dusted, and then deal with the terrorist problem. That's how the government wants to do it. It's their responsibility, they have taken it on and they want to follow it up. I don't see why in matters like this we have to start by suspecting the government, you have to start by disputing the government, and you have to start by saying everything. If you start with the premise that this government is wrong, then everything which they say and which doesn't stand in with your hypothesis, you disbelieve. If the government is saying there is a serious threat on the border, and the Prime Minister of Pakistan himself has said such a large number of terrorists are waiting to cross over, you have had incidents on the border, 4 people of the BAT have been shot dead 3 days back. I don't see any reason to start suspecting the government of lying. I mean, somebody has a point of view saying that no, I don't believe this government, and that's a political thing. I'm speaking for myself. I don't see why everything the government says should be treated with such disdain.
Mr. Salve, this is Ruchi here. Just help us understand. I was reading somewhere and it said that the Supreme Court in one of its orders had said that one cannot tinker with the basic structure of the Constitution. Is Article 370 a part of the basic structure, and is altering Article 370 also altering the very foundation of Jammu and Kashmir's accession to India?
So, again, there are 3 distinct legal issues you have conflated. Amendment of the basic structure was a limitation on the power to amend the Constitution. There has been no amendment to the Constitution. So, I don't know where this basic structure is coming up. Secondly, Article 370 is a temporary provision as it characterizes itself. So, if Article 370 was to be deleted, Parliament frankly would be taking away the power to introduce the Constitution in Jammu and Kashmir. I don't know why Parliament would delete 370. Parliament has, or rather the government would delete 370. The government has used the power of 370 to introduce the whole Constitution instead of bits of the Constitution which were in force. So, I don't know where this Article 370 being deleted or Article 370 being abrogated and that violating the basic structure coming up. What somebody will in fact have to say is that the exception to the fundamental rights which had been created has been taken away, and the fundamental rights have been given full play in Jammu and Kashmir, far from violating the basic structure, that strengthens the basic structure.
And Mr. Salve, if you had to advise the government, I'm going to make this my last question because we're running out of time. We've got certain contours on how it's going to pan out, but because it's a delicate situation where militancy is also high, clearly the boldness of the government, being seen over here. Do you think, for example, let's say the police force, would that have to be the central police force for now in Jammu and Kashmir? A lot of those infrastructure and deployments that you would have, would they have to report directly to New Delhi, or do you think it'll actually be, with the Union Territory itself?
Well, right now, the way things stand, the governance of the state is in the hands of the center. It is being governed through the governor. And I think if one was to get real, if you have to have effective governance in the present state of mind and present mood in Kashmir, it has to be the union government. Now, they have to find a way of politically making this decision acceptable, and time will be required to get this thing accepted and working. A lot of misgivings, this general impression being created that, oh my God, there's something terrible going to happen to the lay person of Kashmir. Personally, I don't subscribe to that, and it takes time for these things to work out. So, it is a far-reaching decision. It's a major surgery of attaching a limb rather than detaching a limb. Now, let's see how it plays out.